My name is Cora Miller, and I used to think loyalty was a currency that paid dividends. For 14 years, I poured my heart into a Seattle tech firm, believing my late nights and fixed budgets would earn me a seat at the table. Instead, I got a one-way ticket to the unemployment line, and it started with a calendar invite that felt like a punch to the gut. It was a Tuesday morning, and my Outlook pinged with a meeting at 9:13 a.m., not 9 o'clock, not 9:15, but 9:13, like they'd picked the time to throw me off balance. The subject line read Realignment Strategy Sync from Todd Harlan in HR. In corporate speak, that's code for brace yourself. I walked into the glass-walled boardroom at our sleek Belltown office, the air heavy with the scent of fresh paint and betrayal. Todd sat there, perched on the table's edge like a vulture in a cheap suit, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Next to him was Paul Grayson, my boss of 14 years, staring into his oat milk latte like it held the secrets to the universe. He wouldn't meet my gaze. "Cora, thanks for coming on short notice," Todd said, his voice dripping with fake warmth. My chair was already pulled out, never a good sign. Then came the script. As part of our efforts to optimize operational efficiency and drive cross-functional innovation, your role has been deemed redundant. Translation: we're replacing you with a 22-year-old who knows pivot tables and works for half your salary. I blinked, waiting for Paul to say something, anything. He just nodded, his head bobbing like a broken toy. My chest tightened, a mix of shock and humiliation burning through me. Todd slid a folder across the table like he was dealing cards at a rigged game. "Here's your separation packet, severance terms, COBRA info, final paycheck details. We appreciate your contributions." That word, appreciate, hit like a slap. 14 years of mentoring teams, salvaging Paul's botched projects, and leading through 3 mergers, and all I got was a pamphlet and a passive-aggressive pen with the company logo. Paul stood abruptly, muttering, "Todd will walk you out," and bolted like the room was on fire. Walk me out? Like I was some intern caught stealing Post-its, not the woman who'd kept his department afloat. I gathered my things in a daze, a chipped mug from a team retreat, a photo of my rescue dog Luna, a tiny succulent I'd nurtured on my desk. Todd hovered, smirking, and when he said I couldn't take the plant because it was company property, I grabbed it anyway. As I walked through those glossy halls, my heels echoing, one thought screamed louder than my heartbreak. They didn't just fire me, they erased me. Back at my Capitol Hill apartment, I sat on the hardwood floor, a cardboard box of my career on one side, Luna on the other. Her soft brown eyes watched me, her head tilted like she could sense the storm inside me. I'd always imagined leaving that job on my terms, maybe a corner office, or at least a farewell email I wrote myself. Instead, I was 38, unemployed, with a severance package that wouldn't cover my parents' medical bills for a month. The injustice clawed at me, raw and relentless. I opened a bottle of cheap Merlot and started shredding. Old meeting notes, employee handbook pages, even a tacky teamwork makes the dream work certificate from 2015, everything went into the shredder's jaws. Each word was a release, a scream I couldn't let out in that boardroom. I thought of every weekend I'd worked while Paul took his kids to soccer practice, every time I'd fixed Todd's diversity training slides when he thought equity was just a buzzword. 14 years of loyalty, and they'd handed me 2 weeks' pay and a mental health hotline number. My laughter was bitter, echoing in the quiet room. Luna nudged my hand, her wet nose grounding me as I stared at the box. That company had been my lifeline. Growing up in Tacoma, I'd watched my parents scrape by, Dad's hospital bills piling up after his heart attack, Mom working double shifts at the diner. When I landed that tech job after a soul-crushing stint in retail, it felt like salvation. I'd clawed my way up from coordinator to senior project manager, thinking my hard work would protect me. But Todd's smug, standard policy and Paul's cowardice proved me wrong. They'd treated me like a line item, not a person. I poured another glass, my hands shaking. The shredder jammed on a stack of old performance reviews, and I took it as a sign to stop. My apartment looked like a crime scene of corporate collateral, paper scraps, empty wine bottles, and Luna's judgmental stare. I raised my glass to her. To loyalty, I slurred, and to 2 weeks of severance. Cheers, corporate America. My heart ached, not just for the job, but for the version of me who'd believed in it. I'd given them everything, and they'd left me with nothing but a branded pen and a burning sense of betrayal. But somewhere in that haze, a spark flickered. I didn't know it yet, but buried in that box of memories was something they'd overlooked, something that would make them regret underestimating me. As Luna curled up beside me, I felt it. The fall was over. I wasn't just going to crawl out of this. I was going to fight. The next morning, my head throbbed, and my living room looked like the aftermath of a paper shredder's bender. Luna snored softly on the couch, oblivious to the chaos. I couldn't sleep, not after Todd's smirk and Paul's betrayal kept replaying in my mind like a bad movie. I needed answers, something to make sense of how 14 years could end in a cardboard box. So, I started digging through it, half expecting to find nothing but more proof of my naivety. Old emails, printed Slack messages, a faded team photo from a retreat where I'd organized every detail, none of it helped the ache in my chest. Then, wedged in a dusty accordion folder, I found it, my original employment contract, signed when I was 24 and buzzing with hope. Back then, I'd escaped a retail job where the manager thought benefits meant free coffee on Black Friday. This contract had been my ticket to stability, a promise of a future where I could support my parents without breaking. I flipped through its yellowed pages, the ink still sharp with corporate jargon, salary, vacation days, some nonsense about ergonomic chairs I never got. Then, on page 7, a paragraph stopped me cold. All unvested shares under the Employee Equity Incentive Plan shall become fully vested upon termination of employment by the company without cause. I read it again, my heart pounding. Without cause. Todd's exact words in that boardroom had been, "This isn't about performance, Cora. It's just restructuring. No cause." My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone, snapping photos of the clause like it might vanish. Those shares, grants from my first year, refreshed annually, were mine. Not pending, not negotiable. Mine. I sank onto the floor, clutching the paper. Hope wasn't soft or warm, it was sharp, like a blade I hadn't known I was holding. I hadn't checked the stock price in years, not since the company went public. I didn't know the exact value, but I knew enough. Those shares could be worth thousands, maybe more. Todd hadn't mentioned them in the severance packet. Not a word. They'd assumed I'd sign their pathetic offer and slink away, too broken to read the fine print. Big mistake. My mind raced. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew this clause was a lifeline. I Googled Seattle employment lawyer equity shares and scrolled through glossy firm websites until I found Rachel Torres. Her bio was no nonsense, a former factory worker's daughter who'd taken on tech giants and won. One review said, "Rachel made my ex-employer regret ever meeting me." That was the energy I needed. As Luna nudged my knee, I dialed Rachel's number, my anger hardening into resolve. They thought they'd erased me. They were about to learn I was just getting started. Rachel Torres's office was a far cry from the polished law firms I'd imagined. Tucked above a laundromat in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood, it smelled of burnt coffee and old paper. A scratched wooden sign read Torres Law, and a bell jangled as I stepped inside, tripping over a box labeled Case Files 2018. Behind a cluttered desk sat Rachel, in a flannel shirt and scuffed Converse, squinting at her tablet like it had personally offended her. She looked up, one eyebrow raised. "Cora Miller? My buddy Sam says you got screwed. Sit. Spill." I hesitated, my confidence from last night's wine-fueled epiphany fading. What if I'd misread the clause? What if I was making a fool of myself? But Rachel's no-nonsense stare pulled me forward. I poured it all out, the blindsiding firing, Todd's smug, standard policy, Paul's cowardice, the insulting severance that wouldn't cover my parents' meds. Then I slid the contract across her desk, pointing to page 7. "This clause," I said, my voice shaky. "They didn't mention shares in the severance packet." Rachel read it once, then again, her lips curling into a slow, dangerous smile. She set the paper down like it was a winning lottery ticket. "They didn't include this in your exit paperwork?" she asked, leaning back. I shook my head. Her grin widened. "Oh, Cora. They just handed you a grenade, and they forgot the pin. She confirmed the clause was airtight. My termination without cause meant every unvested share was mine, no exceptions. This isn't just negligence, she said, scribbling notes. It's arrogance. They thought you'd roll over. My stomach churned with a mix of fear and excitement. What do we do? I asked. Rachel's eyes glinted. We don't just ask for the shares. We make them choke on their own standard policy. We're framing this as a breach of good faith. Omitting a material clause screams bad intent. She leaned forward, her voice low. You want money, or you want them to sweat? I swallowed hard. Both. Her laugh was sharp, like she'd been waiting for that answer. Good. You're my kind of client. Rachel's backstory came out as we talked. Her dad had been laid off from a factory job when she was a kid, left with nothing after years of loyalty. She'd become a lawyer to fight for people like him, like me. This wasn't just a case for her. It was personal. They underestimated you, she said, tapping the contract. Big mistake. By the time we're done, Todd's going to wish he'd stayed in finance. As I left her office, the weight of betrayal lifted slightly. I wasn't alone anymore. I had a partner, a plan, and a clause that could bring that glass tower crashing down. For the first time in days, I felt dangerous. Rachel didn't waste time. By the next morning, she drafted a letter that was less a request and more a legal landmine. It quoted the equity clause, highlighted Todd's standard policy mantra as evidence of negligence, and demanded the full value of my vested shares. We're not begging, Rachel said over the phone, her voice crackling with glee. We're educating them on how badly they screwed up. She sent it at 9:01 a.m., time to hit their inboxes like a way-up call from hell. Now, she said, we wait. Let them sweat. Waiting was torture. I paced my apartment, Luna trailing me like a worried shadow. By 9:15, I'd refreshed my email 5 times, convinced my Wi-Fi was conspiring against me. By noon, I was glued to a stock market app, trying to estimate the value of my shares. The company was pre-IPO, and whispers of a merger had been floating around. Those shares could be worth 6, maybe 7 figures. The thought made my heart race, but doubt crept in like damp rot. What if they ignored the letter? What if the clause wasn't as airtight as Rachel thought? I texted her at 2 p.m. What if they just say no? Her reply was instant. Then we dragged Todd into arbitration and make him explain standard policy to a judge. Chill. I tried to chill. I took Luna for a walk through Volunteer Park, the Seattle drizzle soaking my jacket, but my mind was back in that boardroom, replaying Todd's smirk. I'd given that company everything: 14 years of late nights, of carrying Paul's team, of believing loyalty meant something. Now I was a ghost in their system, and the silence from their end felt like a second betrayal. By day 2, I was spiraling again, Googling, can companies void equity clauses, and falling into legal forums that might as well have been in another language. I called Rachel. She answered mid-chew, probably on her 3rd coffee. Cora, stop reading Reddit. There's no loophole. They're sloppy, you're golden. Let me hunt. Her confidence steadied me, but only just. Rachel wasn't just writing a letter, she was crafting a reckoning. She'd explained her strategy. First, the clause, clear as day. Then, Todd's own words, recorded in my exit interview, proving no cause. Finally, a subtle threat, omitting the clause, could be seen as willful concealment, a legal landmine in Washington state law. Tone matters, she'd said. We're not demanding, we're teaching them they're not as smart as they think. But waiting felt like holding my breath underwater. I made a spreadsheet. Option A, they pay. Option B, they fight and lose. Option C, Todd cries. Luna snored through my muttering. By day 3, I drove past the company's Belltown office. Just once, okay, twice. I parked across the street, watching employees file in, their lives untouched while mine was in limbo. A delivery guy rolled in a cart of sandwiches. Someone was celebrating while I was counting pennies for my parents' prescriptions. But as I stared at those tinted windows, something shifted. That building didn't own me anymore. It couldn't hurt me unless I let it. And I wasn't going to let it. Rachel's text came that night. It's ready. They're about to learn what standard policy really costs. At 7:14 a.m., my phone buzzed, jolting me awake. Paul Grayson's name flashed on the screen, and for a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Paul, my spineless boss who'd stared at his latte while I was fired, didn't deserve my morning coffee time. But curiosity won. I answered, voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. Hello, Paul. Cora, what the hell did you do? His voice was raw, not angry but panicked, like he'd woken up to find his house on fire. I leaned back on my couch, Luna's head on my lap, and sipped my coffee, letting him stew. You blindsided them, he sputtered. That letter, it's chaos. Legal's freaking out, the CFO's involved. Even Mark Ellison got dragged into a 6 a.m. meeting. Do you know what you've started? I smiled into my mug. Morning, Paul. I thought you only worked banker's hours. He groaned, ignoring my jab. This isn't funny, Cora. Those shares, your vesting clause, it's a mess. They're saying it's 10% of the last equity pool. Finance is scrambling because they didn't update your eligibility before the termination went through. It's an earnings hit, Cora. They might have to disclose it. My heart skipped. 10%? I hadn't run the numbers yet, Rachel was still digging, but that could mean millions, especially with the IPO looming. Oops, I said, my voice dripping with mock innocence. Didn't you all just announce a new options pool last quarter? Paul made it sound like a deflating balloon. Exactly. You were supposed to be phased out, but the system didn't update in time. They screwed up, and now it's a governance issue. There it was. They hadn't just fired me, they'd handed me a loaded gun because they were too lazy to check their own contracts. So Mark's mad? I asked, picturing the CEO's Botoxed face crumpling. Livid, Paul said. He stormed out, said someone's getting fired. Todd looked like he was going to puke. I almost laughed. Almost. You can't keep pushing this, Cora, Paul pleaded, his voice cracking. You got your severance. Why stir the pot? I let the silence stretch, my anger flaring. Because you treated me like garbage, Paul. You let Todd walk me out like I was nothing after I carried your team for 14 years. I read the fine print, and now I'm a shareholder. A big one. He didn't respond. He knew. You didn't just fire me, I said, my voice low and steady. You made me a problem. I hung up, my pulse calm for the first time in days. Luna looked up, her tail thumping. The company wasn't just sweating, they were cracking. And all I'd done was hold up a mirror to their own mistakes. Friday morning, I walked back into the Belltown office, but this time, I wasn't invisible. No cardboard box, no Todd escorting me like a criminal. Rachel led the way, her navy suit sharp enough to cut glass, her stride like a general storming a battlefield. I wore black, power black, not morning black, my heart pounding, but my head high. The same potted fern stood in the hallway, mocking me with its perfect leaves. Inside the boardroom, the air was thick with tension. 6 suits sat at the table, 2 more hovered by the wall with laptops, and at the head was Mark Ellison, the CEO, his tan too perfect, his smile too tight. Cora, thank you for coming, Mark said, standing like he was hosting a TED Talk, not a reckoning. We appreciate the chance to discuss this in person. Rachel dropped her binder on the table with a thud that echoed like a gavel. Let's talk about your standard policy, she said, her voice calm but lethal. She tapped her laptop, and the projector flared to life, displaying my contract's equity clause in bold. All unvested shares shall become fully vested upon termination without cause. Care to explain why this wasn't in Cora's severance packet? She asked, staring straight at Todd. Todd shrank, his face pale as the oat milk he loved. It wasn't in the template, he stammered. Rachel's smile was a blade. Funny, because it's in her signed agreement, which supersedes your templates. Unless good faith means forgetting million-dollar clauses. A lawyer opened his mouth, but Rachel cut him off. I want to hear from Todd first. He squirmed, a deer in headlights. Mark jumped in, palms up like a peacemaker. We're not here to debate language. We want to make this right. Rachel leaned forward. Then acknowledge the shares vested the second you fired Cora without cause. A lawyer, a wiry guy with a Rolex, tried to pivot. We could explore a buyback, an alternative arrangement. I cut him off, my voice steady, surprising even me. No, I'm not selling. I'm not backing down. I'm here to remind you I wasn't your mistake. I was your blind spot. Rachel nodded, her eyes gleaming like she'd just seen me hit a grand slam. Mark rubbed his temples. "We're trying to be reasonable." Rachel laughed, sharp and unapologetic. "Reasonable? Like omitting a clause worth millions? Or letting Todd handle contracts when he can't spell compliance?" Todd winced, and I bit back a smirk. The meeting dragged on. Lawyers tap danced. Rachel dismantled their arguments like a chef filleting fish. They offered a one-time payment, a fraction of the share's value, tied to an NDA. "A muzzle with a bow," I muttered. Mark unfolded the offer sheet himself. "Liquid value plus 20%. We wire today. Everyone's happy." I looked at the number. It was a joke, maybe a fifth of what the shares could fetch post-IPO. "No," I said, locking eyes with Mark. His smile cracked. "No, not even close," I said. Rachel took over, her voice ice cold. "Option 1, wire the full market value of Cora's shares by 5 p.m., no strings. Option 2, she keeps the shares, becomes a shareholder, and files motions to audit your termination practices publicly. Think press releases, investor calls, and the words equity suppression in every headline." The room froze. Mark's face drained of color. "Draft the wire," he said to his lawyer, his voice tight. No handshake, no apology, just defeat. As we left, Rachel nudged me. "They'll remember you, Cora." I felt it, the weight lifting. I wasn't disposable anymore. I was a shareholder, and they'd just learned what that cost. For hours later, my phone pinged with a bank notification. 7 digits, clean, no strings. The full value of my shares, wired directly to my account. I stared at the number, my hands shaking, Luna's head resting on my knee. It wasn't just money, it was vindication. 14 years of loyalty, of carrying Paul's team, of swallowing Todd's incompetence, and I'd walked away not just whole but powerful. I didn't pop champagne or post a cryptic LinkedIn update. I deleted every email folder with the company's name, fed Luna an extra scoop of kibble, and sat in the quiet of my apartment, letting the truth settle. I'd won. The victory wasn't loud, but it was mine. I thought of my parents, Dad's hospital bills, Mom's tired hands after years at the diner. This money meant I could help them, maybe even move them closer to Seattle. I thought of Rachel, her fierce grin as we left the boardroom, her words echoing, "You didn't just get even, Cora. You got equity." The company hadn't just paid me, they'd learned I wasn't invisible. They'd underestimated me, and I'd turned their mistake into a mirror they couldn't ignore. As Luna curled up beside me, I felt lighter than I had in years. The betrayal still stung, but it didn't define me anymore. I was ready to start again, not as the woman who'd begged for fairness, but as the one who demanded it and won. I didn't need their glass tower. I'd build my own future, one where loyalty meant something, even if it was just to myself. To everyone who's walked this journey with me, thank you. You've seen me through betrayal, battles, and a comeback I never saw coming. If my story hit you where it hurts, hit that subscribe button and join us. We're telling tales of grit, heart, and standing up to the suits who think they can erase us. Keep fighting for your truth, and I'll meet you in the next story, where every win feels like a seat at the table you earned.